Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. This is Jane Vovsky, your partner for bookkeeping and operational support. And together with me, I have Irene Sinatskaya, who is a partner at Sinatskaya University, and she's your partner for employment law. And today we're going to talk about a very interesting subject, household employees. And specifically, I'd like to talk about the nanny tax and the household employee taxes. And it's a lot more strict than a lot of people think. So household employees are considered to be your actual employees. You need to pay taxes, often referred to as nanny taxes, where the individual is classified as employee according to tax rules. So according to IRS, your nanny becomes a household employee if your nanny, if you control the work that your nanny does and how they do it. It doesn't matter where you hire them from or how you pay them. You're supposed to, if you're telling them what to do, they're your employee. So you're going to be obligated to be paying FICA taxes. And if they're making more than 2,400 in cash wages in 2022. So it's basically around 15.3% between Social Security, Medicare tax, and if you're not going to be withholding the portion from the employee, you're going to be obligated to pay yourself. Also, you'll need to apply for the EIN number, employer ID number for the household employee, and then you could issue a W-2 from that number, which is pretty simple. It's just your name and your Social Security and address. Another question that comes up is that, can you claim a nanny on your taxes? So you can't claim a nanny on the taxes, but you could be eligible for the child independent care tax credit. And you just need to have a qualifying child under 13, and the nanny must be looking after them because you're either working or looking for work. And you must have an adjusted gross income of 438,000 or less. Another part of it is that if you don't want to be dealing with any of these on your own, you could do a complete household payroll service, and there are plenty of those services available that do specifically work with senior caregivers or household employees or nannies, and they also could do some background checks. So there's plenty of help out there if you don't want to be sort of handling on your own. But I do like to go to Irene to talk about the legal aspect of that, because I'm sure there are so many cases and scenarios that she could tell us about.
Hi, Jane. Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Absolutely. So this is a topic that comes up, and we're going to group this together as this could be a nanny, this could be a caretaker, a caregiver in the house, in the home. And I want to separate first when you have somebody that comes in and is providing the service and they are working hourly. And so as Jane was outlining this, it really very much sounds like this is an employee, because you could put the employee on payroll. You can really control the time and the manner in which services are provided. And so we may not think of the services being provided as an employee-employer relationship, but certainly the IRS does, and absolutely the law does as well, both our state here in New York as well as federally. And so what that means is that, of course, any caregiver, any nanny in the home must be paid the minimum wage, which our state now is much higher, significantly higher than the federal. So it must be at the highest rate. That's the minimum wage. Of course, all hours of overtime at the time when overtime begins must be paid at time and a half, just like you would with any other employee if this were a business. Nothing changes just because it's in the home, and that's very important to remember. I've had a lot of situations, a lot of cases that because there are services being provided in the home, or because there's a personal relationship with somebody that comes into the home every single day, the thought is that it's not an employee-employer relationship in the same sense. And it's very important to remember that legally, that financially, that the way that the IRS will review this is very much a standard employee-employer relationship. And I do also want to just take a couple of minutes to discuss the difference if somebody were to just come in on a regular hourly rate or schedule where they're coming in hourly versus somebody who is going to be live-in. Now, there are separate rules allowed for live-ins. In New York, if you do have a live-in caretaker or live-in nanny, they're allowed to be actually paid up to not up to, but 13 hours for their work, even though they're in the home for 24. However, in order to be allowed to pay 13 hours, the caregiver, the nanny, must have at least 8 hours of sleep during that day, and 5 of those 8 hours must be consecutive uninterrupted sleep. In addition, the caregiver, the nanny, must have 3 hours or 3 1-hour uninterrupted meal breaks. And so together, that really makes up those extra other 11 hours that aren't being compensated, which is why the state said 13 is what's allowed. That means that there has to be accessibility for the caregiver, for the nanny to be able to write in, to make a claim. If they were not able to get uninterrupted sleep, they were not able to receive 1 hour of uninterrupted mealtime, there has to be a way to write that down. And then that time, of course, has to be compensated. The difference between that must absolutely be compensated. So it's very important that there's a way of reporting it, that there's clear communication, because we've definitely had cases that this has come up. Now, we have just a couple of examples of what I've seen, and most of the examples have to do with the fact that because someone's in your home, because there's that personal relationship, there are certain agreements made. So we will send, I've had cases where the caregiver, the nanny, took a 1 month vacation every year. That 1 month vacation was entirely paid by the family. And instead, the agreement was that there is to be no overtime. And that came from a purely convenience point, because they just didn't want to track it. However, many years down the line, after about 10 or so years with the family, what happened was those hours are going to build up. And if disputes arise, even though out of convenience, and even though probably financially you may have been close enough to what the amount would have been, it may have made sense to both parties at the time, under the state laws, under the FLSA federal laws, as well as how it's being paid and accounted for tax-wise, that would be inappropriate. So it's very important that even though it's within the home and it's a caregiver, it's a nanny in the home, that the same rules that we've been discussing with Jane about making sure that you have proper record keeping and accounting for every hour and ensuring that every hour is paid for, that you make sure that you still keep that same list, make sure that you're keeping the same books and records that you would, and continue to operate as if this is a business. And this is a strictly employee-employer relationship, even though it's in the home. That's the biggest mistake that I've seen happen. And of course, if there's any questions, Jane and I are always here. Please feel free to call or email us with any questions that may come up. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.